Hi, my name is Claire and welcome to my channel. Back in winter 22, I applied for university for my undergraduate through UCAS. If you want to know more about UCAS, you can check out my past video that I did on this. But today I'm only gonna focus on the personal statement. So I'm an undergraduate student for English literature at the University of Kent, Canterbury. And back when I had to apply to UCAS and write my personal statement, I noticed the lack of arts and humanities based personal statements, and I was struggling quite a lot because I only found personal statements related to business or I don't know, philosophy as well, to be fair, but it's just a bit different. And this is why I decided now to make this video, because I want to share my personal statement that I specifically did for my English literature undergraduate. So, what is a personal statement? A personal statement might be the most important part of your application. It basically decides, not to be very dramatic, but it can basically decide whether a university picks you or not. So it's supposed to talk about your accomplishments and who you as a person are, as well as talk about motivations and aspirations for life that you have. And overall, it's just very different. You need to be different, sadly. You have to be individual, and it's not very easy. And it's also quite hard to start. And I think everybody's in the same boat, so let's just get this over with. To start off, what are kind of the limitations on a personal statement? A personal statement is, over UCAS, is supposed to not be over 4,000 characters. Characters, that means letters as well as space between the letters. So it adds up really quickly. And maybe 4,000 now sounds like a lot, but it's really not. It's supposed to be between, I think, 550 and 1,000 words. Mine was just below 700. So I think that's quite a good average to see how far you go. And that's not very long to put all these things that you're supposed to mention into one text. It's quite difficult. So it's normal that not everything goes according to plan. And that's fine. It is fine. How did I do it? It's not very easy to explain how I did it, I suppose. It also just kind of happened. But what I did, one of the first things I did, was go onto YouTube. So if you're here, you're already at the same step as I was back then. So I went onto YouTube and I checked out a lot of videos that talked about personal statements, about tips about personal statements, and I just tried to kind of understand what it's like. And of course, some things a lot of people repeated. Sometimes there were new things that only a few people mentioned or only one person mentioned. So what I did, I watched loads of them and I took some notes about what I found were really useful tips, and such as picking a specific book to talk about. Also just like sometimes examples about what kind of activities they might like to hear. To be fair, I later figured out that it's not that complicated. A lot of people make it sound a lot more complicated than it is, and you also should keep in mind that every university can do their own thing. So there's really no right or wrong in most cases. Then it's also that with these notes, I kind of tried to apply them, but then again, it was not the easiest thing to do. And so I continued looking up some written examples from personal statements. And based on that, I kind of wrote out the first kind of paragraphs. And then I tried to kind of make a remix out of all of them. And then I formulated it still a bit different. Obviously, a lot of the examples, let's say, they were written a lot fancier than I write. So I obviously didn't do that. So I did write it in my own words because obviously copying isn't allowed. So it should be individual. It has to be yours. You can't just go around and copy somebody else's personal statement. Because in my case, I got an actual email from a university later that I got accepted to, and they did like a whole reflection on my personal statement. So they really went through it. It was like a 2-page long email where my academic advisor now reacted to my personal statement in detail. So you should definitely, obviously you shouldn't never lie in your personal statement, so be careful of that. Then after I did this little remix, I kind of started then writing, because for me the beginning was the hardest. I just could not figure out how to start this personal statement. And I think that's quite a common problem, that not a lot of people know how to start it. So sometimes just go for it, just write whatever comes to your head that you're already sure of. And then obviously you will have to do some drafts, and that's okay. Everybody has to do some drafts. The first one is never perfect. Either it's too long, or it's too short, or it's missing one bit or the other. So it's really not easy to follow all these directions at the first try. Sometimes it helps to write a bit and then come back to it like a couple of days later, if you know, just to get some distance to the whole thing. I think that that's something that helped me a lot. Like at least a night between it, and then I would just get back at it. But there are so many ways that you can do it. So as I said, there's no right or wrong on how you approach this whole personal statement. So just go with what you know works best for you. If you say, I really want to write it all in one day, then do it, really. But yes, you should be careful. It is a very important part. So do try and take your time while you do it. So now to the fun part. I'm now gonna read out loud my personal statement from my laptop over here. And so that way you can now see how I did it back then. So yeah, I hope this will help in some way. So, literature can find a way into the heart of its readers. The emotions and characters have always intrigued me. Be it a detestable protagonist, a lovable side character, or a relatable antagonist. Those characters seem to be able to affect us as a reader in our own development. The fact that literature can awake real and lasting emotions in us, and that this mostly even happens unconsciously, simply amazes me. The strongest realization of how strong my emotions could overwhelm me was during my lecture of Matt Haig's Midnight Library about 2 years ago. During only the first chapters of this book, I became completely overwhelmed by emotions and cried. It felt as if the pain the protagonist was going through had been passed on to me in those few pages. I have been wanting to indulge myself even further into the English language with the help of literature, and to get the chance to encounter many more impactful characters of all kinds, and to test where the limits to the conjoined emotions lie. During my early teenage years, I had discovered my love for reading books independently in my spare time. I have used this love to take part in some school contests, and even had experimented with coming up with my own stories over the years. Despite having read in multiple languages, the English language simply had the ability to reach deeper inside of my heart than German or French ever had. Besides my educational achievement and work, I have always put a lot of effort into using my spare time to enrich my body and mind. Being supported from home, I was able to always gain experiences in new directions and to learn even from mishaps. During my childhood, I had experimented with various sports, including multiple dancing classes, learning a musical instrument, as well as playing table tennis and proving myself during a couple of years in archery. Each one has taught me a valuable lesson in discipline, courage, and diligence. Even as I got older, I was open to new experiences and new connections with people. Starting my secondary education, I wanted to look further and decided to join my school's drama musical troupe. During my time there, I got a glimpse of what it takes behind the curtains and on stage. Having met so many beautiful people has been an enriching experience, and I was able to work on my self-confidence and memory over those 7 years. I had later decided to devote my final 3 years to the student council of my school. Acting as a communicator between students and teachers, as well as the school administration, each member had to be able to carry out a certain amount of responsibility in their position. Good relations between the members of the committee and with everyone involved was key in managing a proper organization, and having been part of that had filled me with great joy. One hobby that has accompanied me through most of my life has been scouting. They have taught me so much, from problem solving to teamwork to understanding nature to even basic skills such as cooking. In Luxembourg, where I've lived and studied my entire life so far, learning languages is a big part of our everyday life. Therefore, I have made use of my previous summer breaks to travel with a language program to different cities and partake there in language classes. Not only have I studied Korean in Seoul, surrounded by natives, for example, but I have also taken my chance to use the opportunity under the Duke and Edinburgh Bronze Award to continue my studies independently alongside the other categories. I have always been thankful to chances like this one to be able to indulge myself further into an interest of mine and to share this experience with other like-minded young people. In the future, I want to use my knowledge and pass my love for the English language and literature on to my students as a teacher. I want to be able to share those worlds and the secrets all the authors have left behind for us readers to discover. So this is my whole personal statement. It's quite long now that you read it out loud, but as said earlier, there are certain limits that you have to keep in mind. And for me, for example, I had 3,988 characters used up, and you were only allowed to use up to 4,000, so it was super close. And I remember when I uploaded the original file, it said that I was over the word count, basically, character count, if you want. And yeah, that basically meant I had to cut quite a few things, which was quite stressful. So be smarter than me and keep the character limitation in mind from the beginning. So as you can see, I kind of try to stick to the 1/3, 2/3 kind of rule, if you want. So I kept 1/3, which was immediately the beginning. I got straight to the point and I talked about the actual course that I want to take. So let's say you want to do philosophy, then maybe focus immediately the first bit on the philosophy part. So for me, I focus on the literature part immediately at the beginning, and it made almost 1/3 of my whole personal statement. So it's important that you get to the point. They don't want you to waffle around the whole thing. You should get to the point and just tell them, why is it important to you? Don't be so vague about it. So that's what I did. So I picked a specific book that I read and what this personally did to me. Maybe some others didn't cry, but I did. And that's what I talked about and what my thoughts behind this whole thing were. So that's, I think, quite a nice rule to stick to. Then it's also important that you just talk about yourself. It is a personal statement, so keyword personal, so you should talk about yourself. Tell them what makes you, you. And so it's important to talk about qualities that you have. As you noticed, I try to basically link two things together. So I talked about hobbies or interests, or I suppose past activities that I did. And I then linked them with what they have taught me and what characteristics I now have because of those. So you basically just tell them information about yourself, and at the same time you kind of want yourself to look good. So that's the best advice I suppose I can give for this one. Yes, so that's how I did it. Obviously there are 1,000 ways to do it. Also the end I kind of looked into the future, which is something I've read that a lot of people do. So maybe you just want to tell them that why do you want to study it, and basically another sense, so what's the future plan? Maybe you want to be a researcher, or maybe you want to be a teacher, as I want to be later. So I think it's nice for them to get an idea of why you maybe want to study this, or what your motivation behind it is. I guess it just makes you look a bit more serious, like about the commitment you're going to take if you go to university. So yeah, and that's basically everything. I really hope that everything I've talked about kind of made sense to you. And I really hope that everything I talked about is gonna help you, it's gonna help you in writing your own personal statement. And I'm sure with knowing all these things now, you're more than ready to go ahead and just sit down and write your first draft of your personal statement. Don't worry about mishaps, everything's fine. Honestly, just go for it. I'm sure you're gonna manage. As always, if you have any more questions or any more tips to share them in the comments for everyone to see. And I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.